2, 1. We should be live. Alright everyone, welcome to Dr. Will's Straight to Tape episode 10 already. Hopefully my computer doesn't crash on me trying to live stream to YouTube this time, but here we go. So, I am a sports scientist by trade and by training. I have a PhD in sports science. I'm a coach, educator, or educator in general for TrainingPeaks and tertiary institutes, and I'm an ultra endurance athlete. Hello, kitty. It's my cat. Whoa, Buzzle. So today I want to go over analyzing your training file. This is something Matt and I, Dr. Matt Miller and I, came up with during we made a sports science course, the 6-part, like how to use sports science to train more effectively or coach more effectively. And we came up with the 5 pillars of quick analysis. Unfortunately, my screen just needs to load here, and I'll cut you into that so you can have a look. So this is the 5 pillars of quick analysis. So you got to look at the duration or distance, check the averages, look at the peaks, determine the what, where, and why, and then look for comments and feedback. So we'll do that for my file, and we'll do that for my file for the marathon training session that I did last weekend. So I'm training for let's go, me and the screen. So I'm training for a marathon in about 12 weeks time. So I'm still building up in terms of getting into like the real heavy duty marathon specific training. At the moment, I'm just starting to introduce a bit of marathon specific work into my long runs, and that's what this is. So if we look at the durations, okay, so overall my duration has been ticked. Right, so what I was looking or hoping to achieve was a 33k run, and I did 33.2 Ks. So if we're just looking at the durations, that's all good. Then what we want to look at is the durations of each individual section or lap. Because what was prescribed, if we have a look at that, was a 1k zone 1 warm-up, 19k zone 2, 10k zone 3, and then a short cool down. So hopefully an athlete or yourself takes laps each time, or use a structured workout like this one within TrainingPeaks or other providers. Garmin, you can make them in there as well, and Stride. And so I was running to power, so I'm really just looking at power here, but we can see duration or distance. Yep, I've ticked off the zone 1 warm-up, I've ticked off the 19Ks, I've ticked off the 10Ks at marathon pace, or at least marathon power, and then I've done my cool down with slightly a little bit extra on there. So that's the first thing. You want to have a look, how's the overall session gone in terms of how it was prescribed. Now we look at the averages. So we're not too phased about the warm-up, but the first 19Ks, what have we got there? So we've got a power output of 323 watts and an intensity factor of 0.83, so 83%. And if I have on this thing, I can go show zones, right in zone 2, no problemo, all good. But I also want to double check, what was that in terms of my heart rate? Hide zones. So now I'm going to look at my heart rate. What was my average heart rate? 149. That's amazing, because I know that that is, show zones, right in, easily in zone 2. And I can also see, if we're looking here at this power to heart rate ratio, 4.37, that's below your kind of 6% decoupling nature, or like the number that you really want to be looking at, 6%. If it's below that, then we know it's steady state, and we know like that I'm not accumulating fatigue, or at least heat, or anything that's going to kind of remove me from a steady state effort. So I can see that we've got power right in zone 2, awesome. Heart rate zone 2. How's my pace? 4:17 minutes per K. So that's all right, but I know that compared to last week, that's a little slower. But that's not for now. We're just looking at the averages. Now we want to get into the heavy duty section, the 10Ks at zone 3 effort. So if we go to my power, and this is power prescribed, so I wasn't specifically looking at heart rate, I'm looking at power for this one. We have a look. Yeah, there's definitely some peaks which we'll get into, but we're looking at the average. So we're looking at the average 361, and we can see that if we scroll down, I want to be between 344 watts and 370 watts. So to be 361 average and 362 normalized, perfect. I've nailed that section. That's really well done. So then we can look at heart rate 173. Now hopefully that's mainly just like right in zone 3 as well. Maybe zone 4 you allow a little near the end just because like the nature of the session, it's quite large. So if we show zones for heart rate, yep, pretty much I was in zone 4 almost the whole time actually. So I'm not sure about that. That's probably not super sustainable. So I'll have to have a think about that. Because you really only want to be in zone 4 heart rate, or at least, cresting that kind of anaerobic threshold heart rate in the last maybe 30 minutes of a marathon. It really depends on how you've hydrated, and because it may not be necessarily that it's your actual physiological biochemical effort that has been causing the increase in heart rate, whereas it could just be change in your stroke volume, which then increases heart rate in order to get the same cardiac output. So I need to, finishing at 181. I know my threshold is, I have to actually have a look at these zones, because I know my threshold is around 180 to 185. So I'm surprised that is in zone 4, because I'm not too concerned. If I'm below 180, I know I've got that for a long time. I mean, I averaged 10 hours at 161 beats for, but besides the point, we're just looking at the averages at the moment. And the average, I'm happy with that average, because it's right down the bottom of my zone 4, of the sub threshold kind of range. Anyway, it's look at the averages. That's important. So power's good. Heart rate, yeah, maybe I could be a bit lower, but it's all right at the moment. Pace 351. This is interesting because that's quite slow for that power output, for me. So this is where the averages is important to look at. You got, hopefully, like if you're cycling or running, you've got 3 different averages. Now, the reason that the pace average is quite important is because we then get an indication of what were the conditions like, or what was the terrain like. So we start to have a look and see so you can have a look on the map, because maybe you know where your athlete is training, or where you've done the run. So you can see if it was like on trail or something like that, and we can bring in a bit of elevation to see. This is potentially one of the reasons why I had, now this is all relative, it still was only an elevation gain of around 55 meters, which you can see there. But near the end, where I'm getting more tired, my pace would have began to drop off, as I started to kind of, it was just like one of those false flat situations. But if I'll hide this so it's just a bit more clear, and I can hide. You can kind of see just my pace just dropping away there, closer to 4-minute Ks, whereas through this section here, which should be like your standard, I was more around that 345, which is probably more about what I'd be expecting. So I also know, well, we'll get into the comments later, but that's the averages. When we're looking at, we want to have a look at the averages. Cool, so tick that. The next one, so of the 5 pillars, you've got, have a look at the duration and distance, have a look at the averages, and then the third one is check out the peaks. Now, for runners, this isn't probably as important, but for for cyclists, definitely, because you want to make sure, if we ever look at peak heart rates, I'm looking to see if there's any major, like huge spikes where either pacing's been incorrect or there's been like a massive increase in effort, or at least output or input, or physiological costs. So I can see here the peak is 2 seconds 181. So all of my peaks are 180 from about from about 10 minutes 178 all the way up to 180. So there's nothing huge there. It's all just like this continuous, and we can see that in the graph. Like you can see heart rate's just slowly increasing, and if we bring in power and remove speed, power's pretty steady, drops away a little bit at the end, heart rate continues to increase. And then if we look at power, so we've got a 1 minute, which I know, remember I had a look, I wanted to be, my zone 3 was 370 was the upper limit, and so I've got 2 minutes in zone 4 there above. So yeah, like that's something I'll need to look at, especially if I'm thinking about a marathon. I want to be right in the crux of that zone, because any additional effort is potentially going to cost me later on. So that's worth noting, but nothing drastic. There's no kind of 5 minutes at 400 watts or anything. It's all just in the seconds. And then I could also look at pace to see where I might have lost some pace, where maybe I was running, how fast did I go there. If this is a course that's similar to, if you're doing a workout on a course that's similar to what you're going to be racing in, then you want to have a look to see what the kind of pace range is, because although maybe you're looking at holding a steady heart rate or a steady power output, if you're working on an undulating terrain, you need to know that actually you're going to be running, in terms of speed, a lot faster, maybe 20 seconds per kilometer faster than your goal average pace. Because if you're, my average pace is going to be somewhere between 3 minutes 30 to 3:40 on race day with my fancy shoes and everything. And so what if there's a big downhill in that and I'm going to be running 3:10s? Well, the range of motion and ground contact time, force application, speed of force application across the range of motion all comes into play when you're needing to incorporate that. Maybe even it's at 30 Ks or 35 Ks within a marathon, and you haven't trained for that. You've just been going, oh yeah, I want to get under 3 hours. That's 4:13s, whatever, 4:15 minutes per K. I just need to train at that. Well, potentially you're going to be running 3:40s for a couple of Ks downhill. Have you looked at that? Did you know that was going to be a part of it? And that's where just looking at some of your peaks within your your analysis and your file can just help shed a little light. And that's the same with cycling. How fast are you going to be riding? What's your cadence? So just having a look at those peaks, and that's what we've done in the third. So then moving on to the fourth step, which is determine the what, where, and why. And if we kind of couple that, I guess, with the fifth one, which is look for comments or provide feedback. So if I'm determining the what, where, and why. So we don't want to get into we have another step which we discuss in our course, which I highly recommend you purchasing and checking out, which we have the 6 spokes of kind of in-depth analysis and training prescription. But for the what, where, and why, we're just trying to figure out, one, for me, like what has happened here. Everything seems to be going right, so I'm not too concerned. I don't really need to look at the why, or the what and where. Generally, that's if something has gone drastically wrong. If I haven't been able to finish the session, or it's been cut short, or my heart rate rapidly increases and power starts to decline. There's some of those things we can look into. One thing that I am concerned about with this, knowing myself, but knowing if I was knowing the athlete, and I bring up the 10K, so 38:31 for 10K. You know, heart rate, there's a solid increase. It's not drastic, like I said. It's not unusual for me, so we're okay with that in terms of the what, where, and why. The 3:51, now that is quite slow for me. I've already run a marathon this year on undulating terrain at around a 3:42, I think. So to be putting out that power at that speed is potentially, you know, concerning. So that's where we can look at the comments. Now, what I've written here, or what an athlete has written, I felt fine, not amazing like last week, but solid. I'm surprised to see I went 13 seconds per K slower for pretty much the same power outputs. That's how much slower I went compared to doing the same session last week. I had the Zoom flies and a camel pack, which I didn't have last week. There's a bit of wind, and I went up from T9 to long miles, just a description of the course. But it was, which was a bit of a grind. But that's a lot slower in terms of like my 13 seconds per K, which is a lot slower. So cadence was 4 steps per minute slower, and I think that's from the shoes, as I had a feeling the cushioning was making me lazy. I wore the Adidas Bostons. The other thing that I actually did during this was I took a lactate reading. So at the start, 2 millimolars, so I was super stoked to see I could run 20 Ks, around 4-minute Ks, and not accumulate any lactate, pretty standard. And then I took a reading at the end as 5.7, which is definitely high, and then immediately after that a 4.3, so very quick recovery. So one of the pros, I guess, of run walk, if we were going to get into that story for another day. So that's about what I expect. So in terms of why did I, you know, the where, the who, what, where, why, is around trying to decipher what, you know, why has something has happened. Like, why has the session been exceptionally fast? Why has it been exceptionally slow? Why is your heart rate rapidly, you know, shot off into zone 5? Were you wearing wrist-based heart rate versus, you know, a heart rate strap? What shoes were you wearing? What were the conditions like? What terrain were you running on? All of those things can help once you've deciphered, you know, you've looked at, you know, the completion. How is it being done as prescribed? Have you, you know, what are the averages? What are the peaks? And then going through and deciphering the who, what, where, why with the comments in there. So for me, it was really interesting to show that when I put on around 1.5 kg with my camel pack, with some water, and I put on some shoes, which I knew, Zoom flies, the Nike Zoom fly, I knew they were slower, way slower. And this is just training shoe versus training shoe, though. Adidas Boston 9s are just like a thinner training shoe, and I knew that my stride was getting lazy. I was overstriding because of the cushioning, and I was, because I got such long legs, like I'm 6'2", I was, just slowing up a bit and allowing myself to heel strike and come in, and I wasn't getting the response out of the shoe like I do with the vapor flies, the next percents, because of the P-Back's cushioning and carbon plate, which gives you a bit more propulsion. The React foam in the Zoom flies is rubbish. Well, I mean, it's fine for training, but it's rubbish for propulsion. Anyway, that'll be me for, so that's using the 5 pillars to analyze a training file. And that's my marathon training run. You should go out and try that run if you want. And yeah, we can get into, I've got some videos on my lactate blog and stuff, on drwilloconnor.com. Otherwise, check out all my socials. And until next time, guys, we'll catch